Hey everyone, this is Brooke Russell, conservator for Evergreen Architectural Arts, coming here from AIC's Ask a Conservator Day, and I wanted to address one of the questions. What is your favorite treatment? My favorite thing to do, besides paint reveals, is, which I sort of discussed in last year's video, is to do paint consolidation. It's probably one of the most rewarding and satisfying, but can be equally frustrating treatments. It's just because it's like instant and you immediately see the results of your efforts, which makes it just feel like you're actually doing something, because sometimes our treatments take a really long time and they're, several steps, and this one is pretty instant. So probably one of my favorite times I did consolidation was at Enoch Pratt Library. On the ceiling, the paint had really bubbled because there had been a problem with some leaking in the roof, and the paint was original to the 1932 build date of the building. It was really gorgeous, and all these beautiful designs. It was all hand painted, yada, yada, yada. And then some water got in and it just really screwed up all of the paint. So we had to go in and essentially, depending on the type of paint delamination from the substrate, we'll do various treatments, obviously. But my favorite is with the tacking iron and getting in there with either syringe or a really, really fine brush and using capillary action to sort of whisk the consolidant underneath the surface. It's really, really yummy, and it goes right in. And, well, we hope it goes right in. And then you take the tacking iron with some silicone release paper or silicone mylar, so that the glue doesn't stick, because sometimes the glue sticks to the surface of the paper that you're ironing on, which is supposed to be sort of an intermediate thing that keeps the paint from getting burned or hurt. Although as a general rule, you don't want the iron to be any hotter than what your hand can tolerate, because then the paint layer can't tolerate it. And then you iron on top of that, and then sometimes, like, oops, you pull some paint off, but that can always be reapplied carefully. But it's just a really, really, really satisfying process. So that's probably one of my favorite things to do. Hi, this is Brooke Russell again with Evergreen Architectural Arts. I wanted to do a second video for my favorite treatment. My next favorite treatment is probably in painting. There's several different ways one can in paint. If there's a lot of loss, some museum professionals, although I have never done this for architecture, but it could certainly be used, as trategio, which is a lot of very, 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 very fine lines to sort of, if there's a large loss in a painting, instead of sort of making it up, which is can go against our code of ethics. It will give it'll give like a unified surface, but it is obvious then that is in painting. So you can do several different colored lines. They'll give the appearance of a background or an appearance of a figure without detracting from the original, but then you're not just seeing this like white space from fills or whatever. There's a lot of different theories on and executions in painting, but probably my most favorite in painting that I've done to date was for a church. There was, the artist had originally added a drying oil that had not worked very well with the film, and so there were really, really, really disruptive drying cracks across the surface. And at the request of the client, like typically we would leave those, right, because it's inherent to the painting and the history of the painting, but the clients found that those cracks were very, very disruptive. So after we applied the isolation varnish, because we would never put anything directly onto the original, we in-painted the cracks, which was hours and hours and hours of using optivisors, which are like those, you probably saw them in Ghostbusters too, but those weird glasses that Sigourney Weaver's wearing, and just with the finest little brush, just painting in the cracks. And what I found through this process is there was just like so much more detail that emerged that had been sort of completely lost in this labyrinth of cracking across the surface. We found buttons and folds, and we realized, oh, what we thought were pants was actually a long robe. And it was really, really satisfying and rewarding, and just really brightened up the canvas significantly. But of course, that treatment is not always recommended, but for this one, it was very appropriate. The simplest answer is when we start with reveal windows, the first thing that we do is we create a crater to see where the substrate is. It's a very small little flick of the wrist with the scalpel. And that way we can get a sense of how many layers go down into the substrate. And the substrate is either plaster, or sometimes it's brick, or sometimes it's metal. And then it's basically whatever holds whatever the paint is or finish is applied to. And then with that, once we get a sense of that, we typically will take paint samples wherever we do a reveal, sometimes multiple, depending which colors we need to capture. For example, if there's a stencil that we find, sometimes we will take paint samples from the right or left of the paint reveal, and then we will analyze those to get the precise color, because obviously solvents will affect the paint layer and can sometimes alter its color. And then from that, we can get a sense of how many campaigns there were. So if we find multiple campaigns of decorative paint, which happens often, we will try to reveal as many as possible. We don't blow through each of them to get down to the bottom layer, as it were. We will create a layered effect of having one reveal of one period, and then another reveal of another period, and another reveal of another period, for example. And then that will give us a better sense of understanding what occurred. So sometimes the reveals show the same sorts of patterns over another. Typically, the best way we know which is the original is because it's the crispest, most well executed design, because a lot of times it's building maintenance, for example, will go in and fix the stenciling or the decorative paint. And so over time, as that occurs, the decorative paint becomes less detailed and more morphed. So the original is typically the best executed design. And then moving forward, and a lot of it also just is knowing the history of finishes, and when materials were used. Certain paints weren't produced earlier than a certain date. Certain metallics weren't typically used before a certain date. So it's holding all of that information in your head as you're performing the reveal as well. And thank you for tuning in.